Talk me out of saying that Psychic Frog is the best discard outlet in the game.
It's a good one.
Ridiculous. What is up, you lovely thoughtcasters of the internet? It's your boys, Joseph and John of the MTG Thoughtcast, here with another episode in our Spider-Man series. Yes, this is the Marvel's Spider-Man crossover, and today we're going into some unique brews, some cool legends with some sweet decks. I know I have some really cool ones prepared, and I can't wait to hear what you've got to talk about over there on the other side of the screen or across your ears from my brother, John. John, you ready to talk some unique decks from Spider-Man today?
Let's call this our Sinister Six of deck brewing.
Yeah, it's slightly less sinister. How many villains did you build with? Just one, or yeah,
Like
it's all loose gray
two-ish,
area.
maybe?
I see. Yeah, I've got like one villain, and yeah, I can't wait to get into these. I've got a budget deck to go over. Do you have anything like unique like that?
We'll get to that when we talk about the deck text, but if you like to enjoy these types of episodes, you like hearing about the decks that we talk about here, make sure you follow along our channel, do the likes and subscribes and comments and things of that nature, all that YouTube engagement. Hyping! Get hype those videos, boys!
Let's hype
Let's
those videos
go!
up. Yes, do the liking and do the subscribing. And this episode in our release series is really special to us because a lot of it deals with brewing decks, which is something that we love to do over on our Discord page. There's a whole tab that's called the Brewery. It's like this all the time over there. So if you want to be a part of brewing some sweet decks, getting our inputs, getting the fellow Thoughtcasters' inputs, over there, you can click the link down below. It's totally free. We play Commander games there. We stream from there. It's awesome. Come and hang out with us over there. Lastly, before we get into all the sweet decks, we have to give a shout out to sponsor of the show, Heavy Play, our friends in gaming accessories. These are our favorite deck boxes, playmats, dice boxes. They all snap together with magnets. They hold super strong. The finishes are beautiful. Quality is excellent. We genuinely love them, have loved them for a long time, and are so grateful for their support here of the show. You can use code MTG Thoughtcast at checkout for 10% off of your first order from Heavy Play. Genuinely, it's awesome stuff. So go and do that. Get yourself some new gaming accessories and support these guys right here while you're at it. That's the upkeep.
Sleeve up these decks that we're talking about, you
Ooh,
know?
in the sweet curve sleeves, inners and outers. It's a lovely experience. It's like you're holding a nude card, but it's sleeved. It's awesome. We love those guys. Yeah. Did you not like the term nude card, John? Oh,
I play my
man.
magic in the raw.
100%. Maybe to shut me up here, you start telling us about the first deck that you would like to present from the Spider-Man Magic the Gathering set, John.
Oh, yes, indeed. But just as a quick brief, for anybody who has not watched one of these types of episodes that we've done before, just a quick synopsis of this is just kind of as it describes. We're going to give a quip. I'm going to quip you real quick. Whip. We're going to just give a quick synopsis over these decks that we have brewed using legendary creatures from the set, from the brand new set as a whole. For a full deck breakdown on how we have established all of these, we actually properly built all of these decks. You can find the links to the full deck list of any of these that we're talking about today in the description of your favorite podcasting source, whether that be YouTube or Spotify.
Right.
And the first one I'll dive in today is we're gonna start with one of the villains. I'm gonna start with one of the bad guy decks. Spider-Man the set has this neat new mechanic into it. Not new in the sense, but it's kind of a play on an old mechanic. So a lot of the villain cards play with mayhem. And there are a few of the villains in here who specifically have mayhem type related cards baked into their own abilities. But I wanted to create a Mayhem Madness style deck using one of the legendary creatures who he himself does not necessarily give you benefit for doing Mayhem. I built a Madness deck around Dr. Octopus Master Planner.
Let's go.
So Doc Ock here is 5 blue and a black for a legendary human scientist villain is a 4/8. Several lines of text. Other villains you control get +2/+2. Neat. Your maximum hand size is 8, so not no max hand size up to a specific amount, 1 card per limb, obviously. And the backbone piece of what I decided to build this around is at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards in your hand, you draw cards equal to the difference. So at your end step, you're just going to boost yourself right back up to 8 mana. What would be one of the ways to get yourself the means to be drawing 8 cards every end step? Well, that's going to be discarding cards from your hand. So this is why I took this card in the direction of Mayhem and Madness, is if you're playing around with cards that discard the cards from your hand and utilizing them for your Madness and Mayhem costs, Doc Ock then at your end step will refill you right back to 8, ready to go for your next turn.
That's so sick. Uh,
Right.
yeah, Matt, it's the increasing your hand size by 1 is such a ridiculous line of text, but the fact that he can draw a max of 8 cards a turn is mental.
If you're going for the discard outlet. Yep. So my deck here called 8-Armed Madness, like I talked about, is a full suite of everything good and exciting within both, obviously, again, the Mayhem cards, but also old cards that had Madness. So like some of the new ones from the set we want to talk about is like one of the legendary creatures, Chameleon Master of Disguise. We talked about
Love
him a
him.
couple weeks ago. Costs for 4 regularly, but also has a Mayhem cost of 2 and a blue, which, as a reminder for Mayhem, is if you can cast it from your from your graveyard, excuse me, cast it from graveyard if you have discarded it this turn, but timing rules still apply to cards with Mayhem. So in the case of Chameleon, if you discard him for the turn, you can cast him for the 2 and a blue. Chameleon himself then enters as a copy of a creature you control, except its name is Chameleon, Master of Disguise, a free bonus copy of anything you have down in play. Really sick.
Yeah, it's literally Sakashima of 1,000 Faces
Uh-huh.
because it changes the name so the legendary rule doesn't apply.
Mhm. But then we've also got Madness style cards. Madness is kind of like, say, the original predecessor to cards of Mayhem. Madness is a very cool one that allows you to play certain types of cards, breaking the timing restriction. A strong, stupid one of that is actually a card called Archfiend of Spite. It normally casts for 5 and double black, but also has a madness cost of 3 and double black. So, which again, this is the kind of thing you're looking for, is that madness cards tend to kind of have a cheaper cost to them if you have the means to discard them. Which, as a reminder, the madness ability is if you discard this card, you discard it into exile. And when you do this, you can cast it for its madness cost or put it back into your graveyard. So you have the opportunity right then and there to cast it for its madness cost, and if you don't, it then goes and lives in your graveyard. This card itself is a 6/6 flying demon that when a source an opponent controls deals damage to Archfiend of Spite, that source's controller loses that much life unless they sacrifice that many permanents.
Fightful indeed.
Very spiteful. Again, the trick you're going to want to do with this is because the cards with madness in specific can break timing restrictions. You could discard this off turn and have it surprise come in as a blocker if you have a large amount of damage coming your way. And then they either have to take that same amount of life or sacrifice that many permanents.
Really sick. Yeah, and being able to surprise them with that is insane.
Let's see. A couple other quick standout ones I want to talk about. We have like just cheap utility ones, stuff like Obsessive Search is a blue mana for an instant that draws a card, and it also has Madness for blue. So you can dump this as part of a Madness like
Yeah.
cost and still be able to cast it for free. Or not for free, but like for its Madness cost per se.
That's some of
Other
my favorite design space of Madness is the ones that just make it like, oh, you can just include this in a discard cost and it's absolutely zero downside for you. That's like to me one of the best things that Madness can possibly do. I love that there's this counter spell in here too that also has a Madness cost, the circular logic.
Yeah, Circular Logic is really sick. It casts normally for 2 and a blue, counters a spell unless they pay 1 for each card in your graveyard, which we will have an abundance of because we're kind of a graveyard deck, I'd say. But then it also madnesses for a single blue mana, which is very sick.
Yeah, that
There's
rules. If you've
there's
never countered something for a single blue mana, oh baby.
It's so good. We've got an assortment of removal spells in here with madness as well. Stuff like Dark Withering. It madnesses for a single black or casts for 6, and it destroys a non-black creature. We have reanimation targets with this one comes back to Mayhem with Prison Break from the Spider-Man set. Casts normally for 4 and a black, but also Mayhems for 3 and a black, and it returns a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it.
Sick.
That's very
Easy.
cool. So these are the cards that naturally have these discard casting effects baked into them. But we also have a selection of 3-ish kind of cards that pseudo grant madness to anything in our deck. Definitely the strongest of them, I think, is going to be Containment Construct. This is a
Insane card.
2 mana 2/1 for a construct that when you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard, and if you do, you may play that card this turn. So it kind of pseudo grants madness to anything.
Yeah.
That one's real sick. Oscar, Rubbish Reclaimer, is our other one. 3 blue and a black for a legendary human wizard as a 3/3. It costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard. And when you discard a non-land card, you can cast it from your graveyard.
So sick. That's everything you want to be doing.
Yep. So that, in a sense, everything else we have in the deck, if it doesn't naturally come with Mayhem or Madness, those cards have the ability to grant that ability, basically, to them. Now,
Yeah, this rips.
Madness cards are only as good as our outlets that allow us to be able to discard these cards, obviously. Like Doc Ock himself does not discard cards. We need stuff to play in the deck to help us achieve the means of discarding cards. And some of the best ones we can do are the ones that are an activated ability of discarding a card to grant some kind of effect to the creature, and especially the ones that allow you to do it at instant speed. Your best boy Psychic Frog had to end up in here for exactly that reason.
Dude, what a broken card.
It probably is the best discard outlet in this deck. There are some like good contenders here or there, but if you can find Psychic Frog early, he's going to keep you steady for the
Dude,
rest of the game.
talk me out of saying that Psychic Frog is the best discard outlet in the game.
It's a good one.
Ridiculous.
Well, there are a few really good ones we have in here that help us capitalize on, especially playing the ones with Mayhem. Like one I wanted to point out is Scourge Familiar. It's a 4 and a black for a 3/2 Phyrexian Imp with flying and an activated ability of discarding a card to add black. That's
Beautiful.
that's very useful for the cards, like especially the Mayhem ones, because this is a discard outlet that helps you pay for that spell.
Sick.
It have a very similar vein to Bog Witch as well here. Is a 2 and a black for a 1/1 Spell Shaper with a black mana ability, and tap it and discarding a card from your hand to add black, black, black.
Once again, that's everything you want to be doing.
Uh-huh. But then we also have utility pieces that help us enable not only discard, but also help keep our board, keep things in check across the board. Stuff like Bitter Triumph. That is a 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you either pay 3 life or discard a card, and you destroy target creature or planeswalker.
One of those is better than the other here, but you also don't mind paying 3 life for this in a pinch.
Sure. Exactly. Yep. Frantic Search, also for the same reason. 2 and a blue for an instant. It draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards, and you untap up to 3 lands. So if you just discard something with Mayhem, fantastic. You've now just untapped your lands and put new cards back in your hand to be able to cast those, whenever.
That rips.
Very cool. The last little bit of what this deck is trying to do is obviously using cards that capitalize on the fact that we are discarding cards to madness them out. We have an assortment of cards that care about when we discard cards. This is just going to be compounding on top of the madness and the mayhem that we are looking to do. Things like Bone Miser, for example. 4 and a black for a 4/4 zombie wizard. When you discard a creature card, you make a 2/2 zombie. When you discard a land, you add black, black. And when you discard a non-creature, non-land, draw a card.
Can I add a point to that real quick?
What's up?
Bone Miser, hardly know her. Go ahead.
No, Bone Miser is sick because, again, as we are doing these Madness Mayhem cards, these types of cards are also just giving us extra board presence, doing other things while we are casting them. Monument to Endurance is another really great one here for this kind of deck as well. A 3-mana artifact that when you discard a card, you choose one that hasn't been chosen between drawing a card, making a treasure, or making each opponent lose 3 life.
Insane in this deck. You'll
Yep.
you'll be getting all 3 of those every time.
Uh,
Sometimes a few times around the board too.
yeah. Because again, you can play stuff during your turn when you have the 8 cards in hand. Ock will draw you back up to 8 at your end step, and any of these discard outlet spells that allow you to discard stuff with madness at instant speed, you're doing that card, you're doing the discard outlet effect, and if you have any of these pieces sitting on your board as well, that you're okay with going back toward your hand, potentially empty-handed, because Ock will then just go right back to your end step and redraw you back to 8.
Nuts. Yeah, he's such an amazing enabler for this deck. Just being able to go, I don't care about dumping my hand literally every turn.
And that's the general concept. That's 8-Armed Madness. Take
It,
Ock down. The only struggle I would see with a deck potentially like this, and I've included as much as I can, Ock is 7 mana to play and doesn't protect himself, so you could probably menangle a little bit of this deck around changing the type of madness cards or discard outlets that you like in favor of maybe adding in more ramp and more protection potentially, but this is the basic skeleton that I decided to start with. Like I said, I included in this list as much as I felt that was necessary as far as artifact ramp and things of that nature to get Ock down as quick as possible, but you don't necessarily need him down to be able to keep doing what this deck is trying to do, because the cards themselves with Madness, all you really do is just get down one of these starting going like discard outlet effects, and you should be good for a little while until you get to the late game where you can play Ock, immediately refill, and start going to town from there.
really sick. I give this 8 thumbs up.
Each
Each
each limb.
each limb is giving a thumbs up for Doc Ock. Also, just one of my favorite villains from Spider-Man. I'm an OG Spider-Man 2 fan, so seeing Doc Ock portrayed in my favorite game just brings me a lot of life. So this feels like an awesome and thematic. Like, this is a villainous deck. You're just throwing things around. You've got the power of the sun in the palm of your hand, and that's Doc Ock, baby. I love that. Well, do you want me to take us into our next deck here?
Yeah, I think you had mentioned you've got another villain to talk about
Oh,
tonight.
I do, and brother, I'm craving some violence. This is Craven the Hunter. This is the Golgari legend, Craven the Hunter. He is 1 black and a green for a 4/3 human warrior villain. Trample, and he says, whenever a creature an opponent controls with the greatest power among creatures that player controls dies, draw a card and put a +1/+1 counter on Craven the Hunter. So we are going big game hunting. This is in my playtesting, this is an oppressive deck because your whole game plan is just kill your opponent's stuff, but target them very specifically to be taking out the strongest thing that they have, because then that starts to refill your hand. This is not limited to 1 per turn. This is not capped. So as often as you can snipe the highest power among creatures your opponents control, you just continue to put +1/+1 counters on Craven and draw cards off of it. So he is both a card draw engine and a win condition in the deck, because as we continue to put the counters on him, he's naturally got trample, and you're going to start getting in for commander damage. So that's what
Mhm.
I would say. The 2 main goals of this is get Craven down, protect him, and start drawing cards off of nuking your opponent's stuff. And there's some easy ways to do that. There's a couple of cards, namely Sazat's Will, and cards similar to this. This is 4 and a black for an instant. You choose one. If you control a commander, as you cast this, you may choose both. And it is each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power. So there's a handful of these types of cards that just makes your opponents sacrifice their strongest thing. And what's great about the way that Craven is worded is it's not when you destroy one of those creatures, it's just when those creatures die, he gets counters. So even if your opponents are taking out stronger things that the other opponent controls, you're still going to get counters and draw off of that. So sacrifice works perfectly like with that. Will of the Abzan does almost exactly the same thing that Sazat's Will does, which is any number of target opponents each sacrifice a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls, and they lose 3 life. And then the other half of it, if you control your commander, is return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is reanimation plus sniping all 3 of your opponent's biggest creatures. 3+1/+1 counters on Craven. Draw 3 cards off of this.
That's
The
really
rest of the
good.
deck, yeah, dude, it's so sick. The rest of the deck is really centered around how do we benefit from our opponent's creatures dying, especially us taking out our opponent's creatures. Some of the ways that we can benefit from our opponent's creatures dying is by putting bounty counters on them, which is unbelievably flavorful for Craven. So we have like Cheval Bane of Monsters here. This is that 2-mana 1/3 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if your opponents control no permanents with bounty counters on them, put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And then whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and draw a card. So this is kind of similar. Like you're just putting targets on your
Craven too.
opponent's stuff. Yeah, it kind of is Craven too. Way, way weaker than Craven is, but similar. And there's a few other cards in the deck that deal with the bounty counters as well. Bounty Hunter being one of them. This is a 4-mana 2/2 summon minion. And he says banana, and his name's Kevin. So you tap. It's a minion. Get it? You
Clever.
you can tap him to put a bounty counter on target non-black creature, and then he has another activated ability of tap, destroy target creature with any bounty counters on it. So all of these bounty counter cards work really, really well together. There is a mana rock as well. It is where are my artifacts
Bounty
here?
board?
Bounty board. Yeah, 3 mana for an artifact, tap to add a mana of any color, or you can pay 1 and tap it to put a bounty counter on target creature as a sorcery. And then whenever a creature with a bounty counter on it dies, each of its controller's opponents draws a card and gains 2 life. So that incentivizes your opponents to be taking out things with bounty counters as well. And you would draw extra cards off of that. So as long as you're drawing more cards than your opponents are off of it, it's an excellent card. And Craven helps do that. There's a few little sneaky, like extra cool ways in here to take advantage of the bounty counters. My favorite is Generous Patron. This also segues us into the next part of the deck, which is manipulating our opponent's creature's power to take out the things that we want to take out with it. So
I
Generous
see.
Patron is 2 and a green for a 1/4. When this creature enters, support 2, which is just put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. Does not need to be ones you control, and in Generous Patron's case, you want it to be your opponent's creatures, because it says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, draw a card. So this works with the support, and this works with bounty counters. So as you're putting bounty counters on your opponent's stuff, draw a card from the Generous Patron. It dies, draw a card from Craven the Hunter. Draw a card from the Bounty Hunter, as long as you have, things with bounty that collect bounties, essentially. So this is sort of the whole plan of the deck, is like manipulate. Oh, sorry. The best way to do that is Sheltering Ancient,
I saw
which
that in
is
here. Yeah.
2 mana for a 5/5 with trample, which is awesome. Cumulative upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature an opponent controls. So the way cumulative upkeep works is on your untap step at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an age counter on this permanent. Sorry, it's been a minute since I've dealt with cumulative upkeep. You put an age counter on it, and then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. So what this does is on turn, your first upkeep around with it, it gets an age counter, and you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature your opponent controls. The next turn around, you have to do that twice. So you can throw those counters and just start manipulating power on the board before you go into your Will of the Abzan and your Sazat's Will, things like that, so that you can take these random people sacrifice things and turn it into like, well, I'm just going to throw 4 +1/+1 counters on your creature. Also, those are all individual triggers, which all individually trigger Generous Patron. And then you play your Will of the Abzan. And you make them sacrifice that thing that's the biggest. So this feels like a villainous deck, which is just so perfect for Craven because you're just sitting here. By the way, the rest of the deck removal, just 100% of it
Yeah, I
is
see
just
that. I'm seeing your removal things here. You've got your edicts and
uh-huh.
specific targeted spot removal. Literally, almost every Vraska and Garrick is in here. The ones
Yeah,
who
100%. Because they're all hunters, and they all happen to work really well together. And then I think at the end of the day, if you can't close out with commander damage or just by keeping the board clear to the point where you can be attacking in with stuff, there's a Revel in Riches in here. That's just whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you make a treasure, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So once again, reveling in the riches of going big game hunting. This feels like its own, you're playing your own game, is what it is. Everyone else is playing Magic, and you're playing like Buck Hunter 2000 as you're, in Cabela's or you're in, Dave and Buster's. That's what you're doing right now. So you're just sniping things out. Another amazing card in this deck is Igra, Eater of All. This is just
hmm
another way to go super tall with something. Igra is 5 mana for a 6/6, huge. Ward, Sack of Food, and it turns all other creatures into food. And then whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, Igra gets 2+1/+1 counters. So she gets huge. But that is a
delicious.
way to turn your opponent's creatures into artifacts, which really helps with like reclamation sages or anything else that blows up artifacts. This is the same reason why Liquid Metal Torque is in this deck with all of the artifact disruption that we have here as well, artifact and enchantment. So just finding ways to systematically take out as many of your opponent's creatures as humanly possible, get a ton of counters on Craven. He keeps your hand full while you're doing it. Also, Tigrid God of Fright is in this deck. Turgrid.
Game
Just
changer.
it's
Ah!
a game changer, guys. This is a bracket 3 deck. We're just making people sacrifice so many things that I just want to get it all back. This is really just manipulate the creatures on everybody else's board and overwhelm the game with how much removal and card advantage you're getting from Craven the Hunter for this. Do not expect to keep friends if you play this deck. That's what I will say. This is annoying.
Well, I think we're probably going to stay on theme because while you have gone and built yourself a deck that cares about making sure the strongest things on the battlefield are removed at all instances, at every opportunity, I would like to go ahead and talk about my next deck, which is not even removing the creatures from the field. Your opponents are just not allowed to play with them anymore.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, I've decided to rip one of the legendary creatures from the scene kit that is available as part
Ooh.
of this set as well. Not we didn't get a chance to talk about this much here on the channel, but it's this fun little collection. They've done scene kits like this before. We've seen it with Lord of the Rings. We actually have some upcoming for Avatar. So there's just this one box kit that you can get, and it's got a bunch of the villains on it, a couple of unique one-off cards on them, but then the card we're talking about for this deck, Sensational Spider-Man.
Lovely.
This is going to be a frustrating deck to play against if you build this. This collection I'm calling the Stunning Performance of Spider-Man is all about the stun counters, baby. We love these. Sensational Spider-Man himself is 1 white and a blue for a legendary creature Spider-Human hero. It's a 3/3. Whenever Sensational Spider-Man attacks, tap target creature defending player controls and put a stun counter on it. Then, you may remove up to 3 stun counters from among all permanents. Draw cards equal to the number of stun counters removed this way.
Dumb.
So, out of the gate, we're looking to do basically one thing in specific. We are looking to play the amounts of cards that throw stun counters onto creatures. And then, as Sensational Spider Man starts swinging in, because it's
Hey,
a
there it
spider.
is.
Hey, you get to pop off any amount of them that you want to, up to 3, and draw cards for the amount of counters that you rip from creatures, or rip from permanents, excuse me. You get to pull from permanents this way. And this works twofold. This obviously works in a way that if you have placed the stun counters onto creatures of your opponent's controls, you get to selectively choose how many of those you're pulling off from any of those creatures to draw yourself some cards. But this also says, like I said, it pulls from permanents. So we're using a combination of the cards that throw stun counters on our opponent's creatures, and we're also playing stun counter creatures ourselves that we can rip the counters from them to draw cards, which is
Nuts.
incredible. For those unfamiliar about what stun counters might be, it's been a relatively newer counter ability that have been on creatures, I believe, since Dominaria United. They introduced this mechanic. We'll talk about it on a card like Impede Momentum. Is a 1 and a blue for a sorcery that taps a target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If a permanent with a stun counter would become untapped, you remove one of the counters from it instead. So in the case, and impede momentum also scries 1. So
Lovely.
what a card like this is looking to do is that you'll tap down a creature and then it gets the stun counters placed onto it. And if it would untap, one of the stun counters is removed instead. And this is also what our commander of the deck is looking to do. It swings in, throws a stun counter onto a creature. You then get the option at that point to just immediately pop off that stun counter if you want to. And then anything else that has gained stun counters, you get to choose to pop off some amount of them, up to 3, and draw cards equal to that amount. A card like Impede Momentum is very good with Spider-Man because it puts more than one stun counter on a particular creature. So Spider-Man can go in, rip one of the counters off, and then the creature that you have stunned down is still stunned because you have left 2 or more still on that card.
Wow, that rips.
Yeah. Another fantastic one is Mjolnir Storm Hammer. This is
Mjolnir.
an equipment to throw onto our spider friend here. 4 mana for a legendary equipment. It equips for 4. When Mjolnir enters the battlefield, attach it to target legendary creature you control. When the equipped creature attacks, you tap target creature defending player controls and put a stun counter on it. Then Mjolnir deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of tapped creatures that opponent controls.
That's so good. I am
Gen-
just having a bit of a conniption about Spider-Man carrying literally Thor's hammer, except Thor's hammer is from an Assassin's Creed set and
Oh,
not.
set your universes beyond expectations out of the window because we've got a lot of different universes colliding into this
Yeah.
set right here. For example, Aerith Rescue Mission from Final Fantasy. 3 and a white for a sorcery that chooses between either making 3 colorless hero creature tokens or tapping up to 3 target creatures and putting a stun counter on one of them.
59 flights of stairs.
Delicious. Yep.
So
So
funny.
this is the collection of cards that we're looking to do with. But like I had mentioned, we are also playing some of the cards that enter with stun counters or put stun counters on themselves because Spider-Man says that you can rip the counters from permanents. I'd say probably the best example of this, and arguably the best card in the deck, is Ambling Storm Shell from Tarkir Dragonstorm. 3 and double blue for a 5/9 turtle with ward 2, and when it attacks, you put 3 stun counters on it and draw 3 cards. And whenever you
Dang.
cast a turtle spell, untap this creature. You get to with Spider-Man. This thing goes in with attack, throws 3 stun counters on itself, draws you 3 cards. Spider-Man then stuns down something of your opponent, but the counters you're removing come from the turtle, and it's drawing you 3 more cards. That is 6 cards a combat if you can keep getting in with those 2.
That's bananas.
That is so good. Our other humongous stun counter payoff card is Fear of Sleep Paralysis. 5 and a blue for a 6/6 enchantment creature nightmare with flying and eerie that when it or another enchantment you control enters or whenever you fully unlock a room, you tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. And stun counters can't be removed from permanents your opponents control.
Yikes.
Lock down all those creatures long term. You just keep throwing
Yeah.
stun counters on them because spoiler alert as well, we're also playing the like creature permanents who enter and throw stun counters onto them, but we're also pairing that off with also proliferating and blink cards to be able to keep having those permanents come in and out so that you have a selection of stun counters to remove from whatever you see fit.
You're like using stun counters as if they were charge counters in this day.
Throwing them on your opponent's board, because the reason this is all working out so incredibly well, because the stun counters are doing as they would say. You're stunning down the entire board of your opponent's control. That's going to keep combat from coming at you. You're going to keep getting in with Spider-Man, and everything's going to be tapped down. Nothing's going to be coming at you. And if they are coming at you, you've got like instant speed cards to tap them down again. You've got bounce spells. You're hiding behind things like propaganda and ghostly prison, so they're not even going to want to be able to attack you anyway. Like, it's a mess of a deck. I had mentioned about some of the proliferating, because we want to make sure that if you are ripping stun counters off from creatures, you're going to want to try to make sure that they have one or so left behind as Spider-Man is pulling them off for cards. So just like our all-time classic like proliferate engines, things like Dreamtide Whale and Flux Channeler, these are going to be some of the better ones in the deck here. Dreamtide lets you proliferate whenever a player casts their second spell. Flux Channeler proliferates anytime you cast a non-creature spell. That's
Very, very good.
incredibly cool, because we are doing blink cards that enter in like other creatures that will enter and put a stun counter on those. We're also going to play Metastatic Evangel from Modern Horizons 3, who is a 2-mana 3/1 that when another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. You get to stack those ETBs in such a way that, like, say, if a creature enters and puts a stun counter on an opponent's creature, you can stack the proliferate below that, so that with the thing is now stunned, and then you get to proliferate that counter that you just placed on it.
That's nutty. It's so good, dude.
Mm-hmm. Some of those blink cards. It's the traditional stuff, you know, when it comes to blink. You've got like Conjurer's Closet and Teleportation Circle in here. So again, these creatures that enter the battlefield and put stun counters on things. You've got an end step to be able to, again, not only blink those, but you can also blink Sensational Spider-Man back in and out so that he's untapped as a blocker as well, just in case, you know, because he's going to want to be going to combat every turn if possible. So giving him vigilance, pseudo vigilance by blinking him out and in is a great way to be able to keep him back as a blocker.
Yes. I love that you
And
got to include Brago in it.
yes, you get Brago in here as well. Yep.
You're an OG Brago enjoyer.
Yep. So then all that stuff is just kind of paired along with other cards that care about how often your creatures are being tapped down, and you know, whatever, like you are benefiting so heavily on being the one that is forcing your opponent's creatures to be tapped down, you know, like this is actually, you had actually brought this up as a, like, you know, why would you play this card over this card? You had talked to me about, like, you know, is Hilda going to be in this deck as well? And of course she's going to be in here. I feel like Sensational Spider-Man is the better of the legendary creatures to play at the helm of
Definitely.
this, because my problem, this is actually like a personal reason, like why I wanted to build this deck, because I attempted to build Hilda before at one point, and my problem I kept running into is there's just not a way to finish the game. Hilda does have an option to draw some cards, yes, but just her own natural abilities don't help you close out a game, whereas Sensational Spider-Man will be going into combat and keeping your hand super filled on cards so that you always have answers and responses to what you have coming up.
Oh, yeah.
But Hilda of the Icy Crown does still make an excellent include in the 99 of this as well, because all the things that we're doing is tapping down creatures. Hilda, by the way, for her abilities, is that when you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you can pay a mana, and if you do, you choose between either making a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scrying 2, then drawing a card. All of which are great. These are all great abilities, just not so much at the helm, I want to say. You could absolutely
Yeah.
try it. You know, you could
No,
swap
I
this
I
sort of
think you're right
idea
here.
around. Hmm.
Sensational Spider-Man is an engine in of itself. Hilda needs something else to keep it going because she doesn't naturally tap something down in the way that Spider-Man does.
That's correct. Yep. So Hilda stays in here for exactly that reason. But as a whole, that is what Stunning Performance is looking to do. The most frustrating Azorius deck to play
Yeah.
against. Your opponents are not going to want to play anything, because any creature they've got down in play is a target to start being able to get stunned down and locked out of the game, basically for the entire stretch of it, while you're refilling, you're not getting combat swung at, you're controlling the board. Terrible,
Oh, yeah.
miserable Azorius control. 10 out of 10. We love Sensational Spider-Man.
I thought that my all removal deck was going to be the most annoying deck we talked about, but boy was I wrong, because I would hate to play against this. Even more so than I can't keep a creature on the battlefield because Craven just keeps killing it. Sensational Spider-Man just thwipping by, and like the psychic damage that you take when he puts a stun counter on and then immediately takes it off to draw a card. That's pure psychic damage. Well, John, it's been, I think, 2 whole decks since we talked about a Dimir graveyard deck. So why don't I show you my graveyard soup, as in Superior Spider-Man. And I'm going to sell you on how insane this Spider-Man deck is. And the first thing I'll tell you about it is this is a $40 budget deck, okay? So
Really?
I built this to essentially take the place of, if you wanted to spend $40 on a precon and you didn't get access to that because Spider-Man didn't have precons, what could you do with $40 in the Spider-Man set? And oh my God, Superior Spider-Man is insane. So it's 4 mana, it's 2 blue and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature, Spider Human Hero. And it has this ability called Mind Swap, which you may have Superior Spider-Man enter as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard, except his name is Superior Spider-Man, and he's a 4/4 Spider Human Hero in addition to his other types. When you do, exile that card. So it's like having a body double in the command zone, which we've never gotten before. And having just constant access to that for 4 mana is completely broken. The things that I want to bring up about why it's so good is that when he enters as a copy of a creature. So if he enters as a copy of something that says, if you cast it, you get all of the triggers that are on top of that. So like, let's talk
Yep.
about Bringer of the Last Gift as probably the best of the cards in this deck.
Mhm.
The excellent hits are things like Bringer of the Last Gift, which typically is 6 black and a black for a 6/6 vampire demon with flying. Whenever it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So it's living death on an ETB, but it's typically horrible in a reanimator deck because you have to have that cast clause. Now, Superior Spider-Man, as it enters as a copy of that, sees that you cast it. So for 4 mana, you get a Bringer of the Last Gift, and you get to living death everybody. So that's awesome. This is like really the thing that I tried to build around with this deck, was the like, if you cast it things that typically hose down something as being a good reanimator target and is an excellent target for Superior Spider-Man. Also, not the least to mention, that you could snag something from an opponent's graveyard with Superior Spider-Man as well.
Yeah, that's always the floor. You're right. That's a great
100%.
ability to have, right?
Floor of it is, and it's graveyard hate as well, because it enters as a copy of that thing and then exiles it from the graveyard. The cool stuff that we're trying to do, one of my favorite finds, and this I've not been able to get my mind off of how weird this is, but how good it is Hypocrisite, which is a 2 mana 1/1 artifact construct. It enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it if you didn't cast it from your hand. So
Yeah.
if you snag this, the Superior Spider-Man will be a 4/4 that then gets 3 additional counters on top of it, and then it has this ability of, whenever it dies, exile it with 3 time counters on it, and it gains Suspend. So it gives you an extra cast of your commander in 3 turns for free, not from your hand, and you get a cast off of Suspend as well. So it basically doubles up. It gives you some
Suspend with haste
protection
as well.
Exactly. And the fact that you can pay 4 mana for your commander to come in as a 7/7, that's the magic number for commander damage. Of you can then hit somebody 3 times with this, and then they lose to commander damage because it enters with the counters. There's
Wow.
obviously other insane like +1/+1 counter stuff in here because of that interaction, like Threefold Thunderhulk, one of the better hits in here, because it's in your graveyard. You play Superior Spider-Man. It enters as a copy of Threefold Thunderhulk. The one in your graveyard gets exiled. It enters with 3 counters on it, so similarly enters as a 7/7, and then whenever this creature enters or attacks, you create a number of 1/1 gnomes equal to its power. So for 4 mana, you've got a 7/7 and 7 gnomes. from this threefold Thunderhulk, and then every time you attack with it, you get 7 more gnomes on top of that. So this is the whole point of the deck, is just throw something stupid like this in your graveyard and then take advantage of the fact that Superior Spider-Man does not actually reanimate that card, but enters as a copy of it that was cast. A few of the other great ones, Hexavus, we similarly. Because sorry, let me rewind for a second. He enters as a copy of that creature, and all he does is modify the base power and toughness. So it has the entire text box, which includes keywords like flying on it as well. So
Mm-hmm.
Hexavus, normally a 6 mana 0/0, enters with 6 counters on it, and then it has some abilities of removing +1/+1 counters, adding +1/+1 counters. There's another one. Pentavus is another one as well. Enters with 5 counters, but then you have abilities to make other Pentavites, things like that. They're similar cards.
Yep.
The Hexavus, however, has flying, which is the good one. It enters with 6 counters on it. So you play Superior Spider-Man, it enters as base 4/4, and then you put 6 counters on top of it. So you have this 10/10 flying commander. And all it requires is that card to have been in your graveyard and for you to have cast your commander. So like I said, this whole deck is built around a $40 budget. What I'm looking at right now is if you were to buy it on TCG Player, at time of recording, it would be $38.61 for the cheapest copies across the board, because Superior Spider-Man is only selling for $1.99 right now. I don't think that people realize how superior this Spider-Man actually is as a graveyard shenanigan enabler. This is also just an insane Sir Conrad deck because you are exiling creatures from graveyards. So that it'll trigger the when a creature leaves the graveyard whenever you play your guy, and then you're obviously milling a ton of cards. So you're going to be making plenty of Sir Conrad triggers to send the board around. And you can even make Superior Spider-Man a copy of Sir Conrad, and it's just as good because it would enter as the copy and then exile. So you immediately get a Sir Conrad trigger off of making Superior Spider-Man a copy of him. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to find some other. There's like I put a Gyruda in this deck. I wanted to try and find a way to make Gyruda the companion of the deck because it's just so good. But I just felt like that took it in too weird of a direction that I just love having it in the deck. It helps keep your graveyard full. It becomes a copy. It's a 4/4 copy of it, and then you can snag another creature from elsewhere. So it just helps keep things going across the board. Um, Arvinox the Mind Flail was kind of one of my interesting ones to throw in. This was the universes within version of the Mind Flayer from Stranger Things,
Uh-huh.
because it isn't a creature unless you own 3 or more permanents you don't own. Then at the beginning of your end step, exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, you may look at them, cast them as though they were mana of any color to cast those spells. So you can play Superior Spider-Man. It enters and immediately becomes not a creature, but then just starts generating you 3 extra cards a turn. Because this normally costs 7 mana for this 9/9. And
7
then
mana of that being triple black as well. So
Yeah,
like
exactly. But who
even
cares?
in
You're going to throw that in the graveyard and then make a copy of it for 4 mana. Obviously, we
mm-hmm.
also have a body double in this deck. This is a body double deck. That just having access to that in the command zone is banging. I actually had a ton of fun building this deck. I sent you a screenshot, John, of one of my play tests where, like, on turn 4, I fired off the Bringer of the Last Gift. So, like, no ramp. Turn 4 just had like 7 or 8 massive reanimated creatures down, all from this stupid $40 deck. It's really, really fun. Please go and check out the deck list of this. Do some play testing with it before you judge its price tag and understand how fun this can possibly be for an insanely budget deck for the price, less than the price of a precon right now.
I love when we dive into these types of deck building episodes. This last one I want to talk about is probably the most, as far as like interesting when it comes to its build constructions.
Oh,
We
yeah.
look at the legendary creatures and we decide, okay, what would be one of the most like what would have a good challenge behind it? What would be the most standout thing that you can build? And obviously there was a part of me that maybe wanted to build something kindred with Cosmic Spider-Man, but like that's too
Too
mainstream.
easy.
You all know that Cosmic is really good. Then I saw Iron Spider's Stark upgrade and thought, ooh, we haven't built something colorless in a while, so let's
Yeah,
go ahead
not
and
since
do
the
that.
vehicles.
Not since the vehicles thing, right, exactly. So, in my deck, I am calling Legion of the Spider Slayers. We are being helmed by Iron Spider, the Stark upgrade.
Mm.
It is 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact creature spider hero, not a human, interestingly. Check that out. Um, it's a 2/3 with vigilance that has 2 activated abilities. A tap ability to put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact and or vehicle you control. And then a 2 generic ability and removing 2 1/1 counters from among artifacts you control to draw a card. That one is on repeat as well, by the way. So as much mana as you have and 1/1 counters that you have the ability to remove, you can activate that one on repeat. So at the deck building restriction of, if you're not familiar on how colorless decks work, you obviously have to build your commander and the whole deck based around what the color identity of the commander is. And because Iron Spider is colorless, our entire deck has to be colorless cards.
Dude, this feels like a love letter to both Modern Affinity and also Tron. Just all
Oh,
wrapped into one.
as a whole, just because of the theming on here, one of the best cards to get down as soon as possible in this deck is the Canoptic Spider from the Warhammer set. It's a
Ironic.
it's a 5 mana artifact spider. It's a 4/4 with flying that whenever another non-token artifact creature or vehicle enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card.
That's what more would you want to do?
It's just so on point because it's also a spider, so it fits
Yeah,
with the theme perfectly, you know?
literally
Um
perfect.
Other artifact payoffs is something like Crypto Thrall, 4 mana artifact construct. It's a 3/3 with gives other artifact creatures you control hexproof. Right?
Yeah,
Keep
lovely.
them keep them safe, keep them protected because you're going to want to keep your commander safe as long term as possible, tapping and as we'll get to untapping to throw many +1/+1 counters onto your creatures is something that we want to look to do on construct on constant constructs, excuse me. I'm so tongue tied talking about constructs and robots and things of
Yeah.
that nature. But speaking of robots, I found a home for your friend from the Jeskai deck from Edge of Eternities in here. This is the Surge Conductor.
Yeah, he
The
rules in here.
It's a 3 mana robot. Is that whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, proliferate. That's exactly what our commander is looking to do. Our commander puts 1/1 counters on our artifact creatures. We're playing a whole bunch of artifact creatures, and as every single one of them enters, the Surge Conductor proliferates all those counters we have.
Yeah. I see that
And
virulent silencer in there too. We're not just
yeah, we've
proliferating
got a
counters.
little if you go a little further down, there's a Blightsteel as well, but Virulent Silencer is
Yeah. We
also
don't need to talk
hidden.
about that.
Yeah, Virulent Silencer, 3 mana, 2/3 robot assassin that whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. It is
Ripped.
way easier to start connecting in with creatures if they are way bigger than your opponent's creatures, right? That's the synergy with the Iron Spider, is that because he's throwing 1/1 counters on all of these things that we are playing, they're going to be hitting in more frequently because they are just larger, you know what I mean? Some very cool ads that I have in here is pieces that allow us to make sure that we can do Iron Spider's ability of throwing 1/1 counters onto creatures more frequently. A synergistic one is Clock of Omens. It's a 4 mana artifact that you tap 2 untapped artifacts you control to untap target artifact. So you tap a couple of your, like, say, token creatures, and then you can untap Iron Spider or basically anything you have on your board that's got an activated ability. The means of being able to tap and untap and retap Iron Spider to get your entire team bigger on any one given turn is incredible, you know? Marvin, Murderous Mimic, in here for the same reason. He's a 2 mana, 2/2 legendary artifact toy. And he has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature.
Not Chucky.
Not Chucky, no. So he's going to gain that tapping to put 1/1 counters on each artifact and vehicle you control, and the card draw ability from Iron Spider.
I love it, man. This
Yeah,
is awesome.
which is
This is
great.
speaking to me.
Yeah, Unwinding Clock. It's 4 mana artifact that untaps all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. That allows you to go to the end step of each person's turn. Your Iron Spider has been untapped previously. You get to tap him again as it goes to the next player's turn, and then he'll untap. And now you've done a rotation of throwing 4 1/1 counters at least on your creatures before it comes back to you.
This is yeah, I mean, this is just hell yeah, the deck.
Hell yeah, the deck, yeah. But then we've also got cards in here who care about either specifically the 1/1 counters that are on it or allowing us to get other 1/1 counters placed onto our creatures. We've got our collection of our big double X friends in here, stuff like Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista, and the new card, Marketback Walker. All of these are artifact constructs that care about the amount of 1/1 counters that have been on them. Typically when they die. I think market back is when it leaves. No, it's when it dies.
Yeah,
But
all
all
when
of
they die.
these do a thing based on the one counters they have on them. Obviously Walking Ballista is a menace of a combo engine, which I believe there is the means in here to create infinite mana. So I guess you technically have an infinite outlet in here with the Walking Ballista or
It's
any of
tough
these.
to build like a colorless artifact deck that doesn't accidentally go infinite in some way.
Right. I found a cool piece with Anduril Narsil Reforged. It's a
Yep.
2 mana legendary equipment with Ascend. You get the City Blessing if you control 10 permanents at that point. When the equipped creature attacks, it also equips for 3. When the equipped creature attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And then if you have the City's Blessing, you put 2 counters on those creatures instead.
Rips.
So just swing in with your things that have the 1/1 counters because of Iron Spider, and Anduril will end up eventually see that you have a huge board of creatures and will throw additional 1/1 counters onto those, Also playing a few cards in here with like say modular or whatever. So like even if those things with 1/1 counters on them die, then they're shifting those counters over to another thing that has counters already. You know what I
Oh yeah.
mean?
Well, and the best part is that Iron Spider has vigilance.
He
So
does.
you
Correct.
attack, you get those 2 +1/+1 counters, and then before damage connects, you just tap Iron Spider, get a 3rd counter across everything.
Yep. Another really good one is Sword of Truth and Justice. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and blue. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, then proliferate.
Rips.
Silly with the infect ones that we were talking about, like the virulent whatever, you hit in, it deals the 2 poison from virulent silencer, then you get to proliferate that and make another creature bigger. It's just it's a mess. And the very cool parts of this then is that because as of late we have had higher amounts of colorless support from the Eldrazi cards per se. I made a conscious choice to not include any colorless cards in here that were Eldrazi per se. So like our creature selection is all artifact creatures, but we
Right.
do have colorless support from some of those colorless style decks, right? So like Echoes of Eternity, for example, here, right? There was no reason not to throw it in here because it still works with playing
Mhm.
artifacts, right? 3 and triple colorless for a Kindred Enchantment Eldrazi. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, it triggers an additional time. And when you cast a colorless spell, you copy it and you can choose new targets for the copy. A copy of a permanent spell becomes a token.
That is lovely.
Right? All is Dust is just the classic board wipe of colorless, but
Yep.
you also get a really fun one with Selective Obliteration. 3 and double colorless for a sorcery that each player chooses a color, then exile each permanent unless it's colorless or is only the color its controller chose.
Ooh, only the color really hurts there.
Yeah, you can just pick whatever color you want because your entire deck is colorless, right?
Yep.
Yep, you get other really fun stuff in here like Kozilek's Command. X and double colorless for a Kindred instant Eldrazi. You choose 2 between either making a target player make X01 colorless Eldrazi spawns, target player scries X and then draws a card, exile target creature with mana value X or less, or exile up to X target cards from graveyards.
Yep. That's everything you want to do.
Yep. And so yeah, so compounded with these new support pieces that you can functionally make colorless decks work now, this is the plan of the deck. You get down your artifact creatures, you play down the Iron Spider, you are throwing extra 1/1 counters onto said creatures, and you're just going to town, right? The biggest benefit when playing a colorless deck like this is that your only constraint on being able to play cards is how much of that mana you have available to you. It's one of the key highlight things of playing colorless is you're not concerned about colors. You don't need to. All you care about is numbers.
Play
I
your
love
land. Who
numbers.
cares what it is?
And this deck is all about numbers. You're numbering up the amount of colorless mana you have. You're playing extra 1/1 counters onto all these creatures. You're seeing how much damage you could do. Number go up. If you are a big numbers enjoyer, you love counters, you love artifacts, and you're like me, you enjoy anything that is in the realm of like the sort of Iron Man robot hero sort of thing, you know, uh Iron Spider is a fantastic piece, a fantastic deck. I wouldn't necessarily call this budget per se. You probably could build it on a budget, right? Because like artifact creatures tend to sometimes be like cheaper. They can be anyway. So
Yeah.
you could build a deck like this relatively on a budget, but you could also be like this and throw some of the strongest colorless cards you can think of in here. You know what I mean? And you'll
Yes.
have a great time. They
Infinitely
all
upgradable.
yeah, most of this deck is synergistic with itself, and that's a great way to be.
Yeah. That's lovely. Well, I think I will round us off for tonight on my hear me out pick for cool legends from this deck. And I know that this is one that you don't necessarily agree with me on of this being a good card, but this deck I'm calling Jackal of all trades. This is Jackal, Genius Geneticist. It's a Simic deck, so it's green and a blue for a 1/1 with trample. It's a human scientist villain. And whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to Jackal's power, copy that spell, except the copy isn't legendary. Then put a +1/+1 counter on Jackal. So I really wanted to lean into the fact that he makes tokens and the fact that he makes non-legendary copies of cards. So this is like a legendary creatures matters, but I also am going to make token copies of them and proliferate those token copies. So we've got spanning the mana value from 1 all the way up to I think 6 mana is our like top end of our legendary creatures. We just have some really synergistic cards that care about historic spells, care about legendary spells. Some of them care about +1/+1 counters since he throws that on himself, being able to kind of either add or remove +1/+1 counters to manipulate Jackal's power as you go to cast a spell. One of the ones that I want to touch on there is Owaka Traveling Merchant. This is the perfect example of a card for this deck. So if you've already got 2 power, you've already played your Birds of Paradise after your Jackal. So he's now at 2. You have 2 Birds of Paradise because it makes a copy of it. Or let's say you're Delighted Halfling because that one deals with legendaries. You then are on 2 and you play your Owaka, and now you've got 2 Owakas down because one of them isn't legendary. And then you just have access to do them both and remove the +1/+1 counters from Jackal so that you can kind of fluctuate his power to continue to make copies of your legendary creatures as you go forward. Bristly Bill is similar, except goes the other way, where you can do landfall and increase his power as you go along. So the goal is to be able to manipulate the number of +1/+1 counters or base power and toughness of Jackal to slide that scale to whatever card you want to cast next is. And that's sort of what the early game is planning on doing.
Kind of like how people manipulate with like Aether Vial and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah,
like you
100%.
you
It
set it
feels
you
very
set it to
similar to that.
exactly where you want to go. Yeah, interesting.
Definitely. There's like I said, legendary stuff. There's a Riki, the History of Kamigawa is one of the better cards in this deck. Because it enters, makes a copy of itself if Jackal is 3 power. And it's just a 1/2 human shaman that says whenever you play a legendary spell, draw a card. One of those is good enough. Making a second one of those in addition to that is amazing. And then, like I said, our sort of payoff for the deck is proliferation. So there's things like full flowering in the deck. which is just X, X, and a green for a sorcery, populate X times. So you just get to pick whatever your best, which populating, for those who don't know, is just create a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. And then full flowering obviously does that X times. So you that doesn't have to just be a like boring vanilla creature token. That can be one of these token copies of your legendary creatures that are no longer legendary. So you're populating out these non-legendary copies of legendary creatures and can have as many of them as you want around. So this is just it's a weird deck for sure. I would not even necessarily say it's a good deck, but boy is it fun to play around with. There's a ton of little synergies in here. You can start working your way backwards with the Prime Speaker Vanifar that's in the deck. Making 2 copies of those is amazing. That's Birthing Pod on a stick. You've got both Sakashimas in this deck, so you can make copies of Jackal, so you can restart, and then you have a couple of different Jackals that you can start to, play with the values of on those with all of your different counter manipulation across the board here. And we're planning on winning with a Craterhoof Behemoth. That's I want to make this. This is in fact a token deck. So we're just gonna go super wide with all of these creatures here, and then play something like a Craterhoof, or I really think it's basically Craterhoof to give extra power and trample to our creatures. Oh, there's an Overwhelming Stampede in the deck as well. That's our other Craterhoof because it also gains trample as well. Yes. So this is the deck. There's not a ton more to talk about with it other than the fact that it's really cool that you just get to make these non-legendary copies. They don't give us that on a repeatable source very often. We've had a ton of cards that say like, this makes a like your Spark Doubles, like that makes one copy that's a non-legendary copy of a creature.
Hmm.
I love the fact that this is repeatable non-legendary copies and the fact that it's tokens. So that's everything that we want to play into. The handful of non-legendary creatures in the deck are either like Ramp, like I said, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling. I really love Springheart Nantuko in this deck.
That's a
Um,
very cool one.
Specifically bestowing that onto one of your non-legendary copies of something so that every time you play land, you just get to pay 2 and make another copy of that as you go on. So this is kind of what it says on the tin. It's legendary, it's historic. Fourth Doctor and the Sixth Doctor are both obviously legendary creatures that deal with historic spells. The Sixth Doctor is just whenever you cast a historic spell, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary. So he's like Jackal 2, except you obviously don't have to manipulate his power or anything.
It's
And
Dr. Jackal.
it's Dr. Jackal, exactly. So I love the fact that Jackal's so cheap. There's a handful of ways in the deck. I have an Elvish Spirit Guide and a Chancellor of the Tangle. If either of those are in your opening hand, you should be able to get Jackal on turn 1 and then just immediately
Yeah,
start popping
if
out
your
some.
land is a blue source, yep.
Yep, exactly. Kamal's Druidic Vow is just an excellent card in this deck. You have to have a legendary creature, which you should. There's about 30 of them in this deck to be able to cast this. But it's just Genesis Wave for legendary creatures. So this is another great way to win the game. And then one of the weirder ones, just with the tracking for it, is going to be your Heroes Podium in the deck. Because it says each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other legendary creature you control. Your copies are not legendary. So you have to keep track of which ones are legendary and which ones aren't. It obviously is just an excellent card in the deck. Only benefits the base cards. But then we also have things like Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, which gives tokens you control the ability to tap to add a green. So we sort of are playing into both sides of the field where we can either be benefiting our base creatures that are legendary, or we can benefit the tokens that aren't legendary. So this is I could see this deck being really flexible and being able to play into either one of those spaces. And just having a blast doing it. This is just classic Simic BS, making token copies of things. I can't believe I need to actually add it to the deck list, but off the top of my head, I don't know why I didn't put an Adrix and Nev in this deck. That would
Yeah, I
be
probably
perfect.
should.
Yeah, because I've got this is a deck that has both parallel lives and doubling season in the deck. So being able to double the number of tokens that you're making is really good. So Adrix and Nev would be an incredible include to this. I will throw it in the deck list before the video goes live. And then finally, like I think one of the sickest cards in the deck is Life Finds a Way. This is from the Jurassic
Yeah.
Park bonus sheet, and it's whenever a non-token creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, populate. So what you can do is you can stack those triggers so that it enters, makes the copy with Jackal, and then populates. So you can then that turns Jackal into obviously once you're above 4 power, turns it into he makes 2 copies of things as he goes on. And honestly, like any of these legendary creatures, they all have the legendary clause because they'd be too powerful if you had multiple copies of them. So Jackal just cracks that completely wide open, and being able to just make multiple copies of these legendary creatures goes bananas.
And I think that brings us to the conclusion of our deck building. And honestly, being able to skim through the set and find some of these very cool and obviously iconic characters as well, but like being able to craft these cool and unique styles of builds is so much fun. And we hope that through all of this that you have found your inspiration. I've been getting the impression that Spider-Man has not been a lot of people's favorite set as a whole. So
Yep,
I hope something like this is kind of helped to bring a little bit of interest back into the fold of like, just because the theming seems a little bit off to Magic doesn't mean you can't have fun building some of these decks.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. If you want to brew some more of these decks, you want to dig into them a little bit further, like we said in the intro, jump on over to our Discord to the brewery tab. We'll have these lists over there at some point in the future to where we can all comment on them and be building them together. Maybe we each missed some cards in our decks that you think we should have had in there. Either go there, or you can jump down in the comments down below. Let us know what you guys think of the decks that are here, or of the cards that we should have included, like Adrix and Nev in that last one. I feel like an idiot for not including that. um, Lastly, if you really want to be gung ho about reaching out to us, you can find us on our social media of choice, which is Blue Sky. That is at MTG Thoughtcast, or at Joseph Thoughtcast, or at John Thoughtcast, or you can send us an email at mtgthoughtcast@gmail.com. That is us for today. That is the third episode of our Spider-Man set under our belt, under our a utility belt, perhaps, as
Uh huh.
superheroes. And we will see y'all next time here on the MTG Thoughtcast.